This podcast contains some magical adult language. Listener discretion is advised. And sorry, Mom.
I'm going to Disney World. I'm going to...
Whoa. You are not Mickey Mouse, you're a rat.
Rat smack! Besides, they're tourists. What do they know?
Hello and welcome to a rat chat, as we call them. This is the second of our rat chats. This is a little different. Of course, this is Rat Castle, a podcast about the, you know, the whole thing. And we now and then have a topic or a guest or something where we want to focus on sort of one thing. And that's why we have these little rat chats. Dave and I both, Dave, of course, Dave Cobb is with me. Hello, Dave.
Hi. Hello.
We decided in a group chat, I asked everybody who had seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and then I also asked who cares about Indiana Jones, and we are the only two that really truly do.
The old white guys.
Yeah, which is not a shock, and might explain some of the box office. But we said, well, why don't we just do a rat chat on it? That way we can go for 20 minutes or whatever, and the girls don't have to sit there and just listen to us ramble on. And they were like, that sounds great.
That sounds awesome.
So to start off, of course, we are going to be talking about Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the I guess we'll call it the final Indiana Jones film. Dave, what's your background with Indiana Jones? Where do you land with this character, that sort of thing? We'll start there.
So I saw the original Indy in the theater when I was 11 years old with my dad, who, of course, was going on and on about how it was the serials of his youth. And this is before we went into the theater. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to see this. I'm going to see this old timey thing from my old timey dad. And of course, after the first act, my eyes are like saucers and I'm glued to the screen. So yeah, I'm right in the pocket for Indy. I did it very, very much grow up with it. Temple of Doom was formative only because I had a very hunky poster of Harrison Ford shirtless hanging in my room as a 14-year-old gay boy. And I stared at that poster. I stared, in air quotes, stared at that poster a lot as a teenager. And then, as I became a sort of, entering college age film school student and etc., Last Crusade comes about. And so it was like, it kind of matched my sensibilities in a lot of weird ways. And became a staple for me. And then, of course, I watched all of Young Indiana Jones. I played the crap out of the games, like Fate of Atlantis and Infernal Machine were both seminal to my video game history as well. So I wouldn't say I'm a super fan in that I'm like, I have a bunch of collectibles and I cosplay and all that stuff, but it is a solid part of a very formative and solid part of my creative and cinematic upbringing.
Yeah, I would say the same for me. Maybe I have a little nerdier collection than you on Indiana Jones. I have a couple items, and like I just got the Funko with Indy and his dad on the motorcycle, just little stuff like that. But
Cool.
I also grew up with Indiana Jones as the VHS in the house. I didn't see the opening of the Ark until I was like, I don't know, probably like 10. Like, I was always hiding. It was far scarier to hide from that and the Holy Grail de-aging.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about de-aging. I guess that's not de-aging, that's up-aging. We'll talk about de-aging a little bit. I loved Indiana. So Indiana Jones fell sort of like in a higher pocket below that was kind of what I called the Saturday afternoon films, because they would show them on our local Fox, I feel like constantly, and we recorded them over time, which was it was like Rocketeer and Dick Tracy.
Sure.
And like these other, The Shadow kind of falls in there, but I love the character.
I love that movie.
I used to listen to the radio dramas all the time. I was a huge radio, old-timey radio nerd.
Yeah.
And so there was that sort of moment, and I think I was just there where everyone recognized between Raiders was a little earlier than that, but between sort of Raiders and then Batman being really big, and everyone saying, "Oh, not that comic books matter, but like pulpy things matter," and so I
Yeah,
hit that
yeah,
second wave,
sure.
um, pretty hard, and then I loved the soundtracks growing up. I did cosplay as Indy for Halloween, and there's
I
multiple
think
photos.
I think we all did at least once.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, for sure. It wasn't a hard outfit necessarily.
No, no, that's the thing. Yeah.
So, yeah, and the ride at Disneyland's I think my favorite ride. Period. I think, it's just so good. The Drew Struzan art is like my favorite. It's
Well, and
all
that
great.
and that and that Brian Jowers painting that never became, which where all the three rides are intertwined. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's funny. I was a fan of that ride, and as it opened when I was what 95, right? So
Yes.
I was 25, and I was actually working for a company that did these remote camera systems for like commercials and movies and stuff. So I was I was at the ride inside for the shoot for the commercial shoot
Oh,
when I was
fun.
like 24 years old, and so didn't get to ride it, but I got to watch it go by. And meanwhile, I had just worked on Back to the Future. I was still sort of doing freelance work as well
Hmm.
as sort of trying to get my foot in the industry. And I'm like, who made this? This is incredible. And years later, I meet who is now my boss, Susan Bonds, who is the show producer on Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And so, there's many times over dinner when there's a lull in the conversation where I'm like, Susan, I have one more question about Indy. And she's like, oh God, really funny. I've got the poster for the Indiana Jones Adventure ride, the
Mm.
one that they sold at the Disney Gallery, in my bedroom right now. I've had it since it came out. And so, yeah, the ride to me was such a sea change for so many reasons. I mean, at the time, I was like, they put Star Tours on a dark ride, right? Like that's the only way my brain could
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
the motion base. But then also things like that queue, which was necessity, right, to get you outside the park. But no, nothing at Disneyland had a queue like that
No.
at all.
Yeah,
Like,
weirdly, decades before its time when it comes to queue thinking, merely because they didn't want you to be bored.
mhm.
Like, but the
Right,
fact that
right,
they
right.
had, for a long time they had the cards and you could like decipher stuff, and I think to Rise of Resistance and how they had QR codes on boxes and stuff with the
Yeah,
app, and I was like, we've done this. Like, this
we've
is
done this, right?
yeah, this is something that has been around, which is fine. It's just interesting to see that kind of heritage.
One of my
Um,
favorite
yeah,
details of the queue is there's that big gasoline generator out front in the queue that's stopping and starting and sputtering and stalling, and the lights are flickering in the queue in accordance with the sounds that generator is making. That's that happens all the way through. Like
mhm.
if you were to get somebody on a phone and call them outside and have them hold the microphone up to the generator, and you walk into the queue, the lights are going to flicker the same way. And
That's amazing.
I remember being told that story, and I'm like, nobody's going to care about that, but it it's such a great little detail, and to be honest, not complicated, right? It's
No,
one lighting program, but it to me, that was just the level of sort of dedication they were making. Even the
yeah,
fact that there's the truck out there, right? The big German truck, and the Mercedes-Benz symbol on the hood ornament is pulled off because
hmm,
it's the one that Indy goes underneath in the movie. Like, just this, it was fan service before there really was such a thing in theme parks. We really didn't. Yes, we had Star Tours. That was kind of a one-off, though. When you look
yeah,
at the Disney parks in particular, they hadn't ever really gotten that to that level of, we're telling you a story from the moment you walk past the marquee sign, and
yeah,
you are in that world from the moment you walk past that until you exit again.
yeah. And I should give shout out to the Indiana Jones stunt show as well, which is incredible. And my favorite thing, someone's gonna say, "What's your favorite thing about Dial of Destiny?" And I think I might just have to say, "Oh well, I got to interview." I'm totally blanking on his name all of a sudden, which is a real
Oh,
shame.
the stuntman.
I interviewed the stuntman for my last podcast, and it's really going to bother me. But anyway, it doesn't matter. And he had never got to meet Harrison Ford, which of course was a question I asked, and some people had, and then lo and behold, the original stunt team got to go. The Marion and Indy got to go to the premiere, and
Ah,
they flew
that's
them
so
out. And
great.
that's just like, I was like, it felt like they got it. There's
Yeah.
sometimes where you're like, Disney doesn't get it. and they don't get the heritage. And then that was one moment I was like, okay, you get that these people need to be there. And I thought that was wonderful. So that's an excellent ride too.
Did you notice did you hear the shout out, what I think is a shout out to the stunt show in the movie, in Dial of Destiny?
I didn't. Where do you find that?
The very last scene when Marion shows up, right?
Yeah, spoilers by the way, everybody, but this has been a week or so.
Sorry, spoilers. When Sala and his kids and Teddy show up and walk through the door, Sala is in the middle of telling them a story.
Oh yes.
And he's like, and Marion was running from the plane and Indy was running from the plane, and then all of a sudden the plane blew up. And I'm like, that has to be a callback to the stunt show. It has to be.
I mean, it's from Raiders, but yeah, for sure. Yeah. Why pick that moment, you know?
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Kevin Broussard, by the way, that's the stuntman. He popped right. Head. So anyway, I think we can both say indie heads. To prepare for this last film, I said I'm going to watch everything Indiana Jones chronologically. So I watched all of the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles in the film versions. No 90-year-old George Hall playing Indy. Kids, look it up. You can find some YouTube clips still. That's what I grew up on, though. I saw a couple episodes growing up, and those were the ones that were on VHS.
So the ones that are on Disney Plus, are they the full episodes or are they the movie versions?
They're the movie versions. Yeah.
Oh, so they don't have the bookends.
No bookends. No, except for Harrison Ford's.
The jazz one.
Yeah. Beyond that, it's this is sort of the canon version, I think.
Right.
So I watched those, and then I watched the original quadrilogy, I guess is the term.
Did you watch Temple of Doom first? Because
I did watch Temple of Doom first, nerd. Yeah, I did. And I watched all three of the originals. I decided to watch them in 35 black and white. So I took them into Premiere and I redid them in black and white. And
oh my God,
it was really cool. I think Temple especially looks better in black and white, but
sure,
all three of them.
I believe that.
Incredible.
I believe that.
Incredible in black and white. And then I did Crystal Skull in sort of 50s Technicolor, and that really does help the film in some ways. It's certainly
do we want to talk about our varying opinions of the films?
Yes, let's go ahead and go through that. Why not? Let's start with Raiders. I think we could. Let's just say like it's the best of all of them, right? Without question.
There is not a wasted moment of film or dialogue in that movie. It is a tight epic feature that does not waste any time. And it fills you with all the right surprises, right? You know, you're all ready for it, not for it to be just about archaeology, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, no, God actually comes out of this box.
Yeah.
It's scary as shit as a kid. You know, like and that's the magic of Indy for me, is that he's practical, he's about what's in front of him until he's not.
Yeah.
And I love how they address that in the new movie. That one little line is so great.
There is Raiders is in my brain always the one that gets to be bloody. Like I mean, Temple, we'll talk about Temple in a minute. I think that's a different sort of, there's a camp quality to Temple. But you know, Raiders is just pure pulp grit. No lessons learned. It's my example in screenwriting class of there's a difference between, you know, what we basically call like stories, and then like there's lots of terms for these things, but stories in movies, like stories, generally characters make some sort of shift, your protagonist moves in some sort of way, and then a movie is just, can they get out of it? Can they change it? Can they do whatever they need to do? Right. Which has been, you know, Raiders is pure movie, and we'll talk about Crusade in a second. Crusade is pure story. Raiders, my favorite for sure. You know, Belloc, best bad guy, best henchman, just, you know, 10 out of 10.
Marion Ravenswood's such a great sort of foil / romantic interest / action heroine, you know.
100%. It's perfect. Temple of Doom, I did not see Temple of Doom until I was in high school because I wasn't allowed.
Okay, because
so no like upbringing, no nostalgia for me when it comes to Temple.
My hot take is that for the longest time that was my favorite one.
Mm.
Mainly because of, again, it hit when I was 14.
Yeah.
It was a little scarier and gorier a little
Yep.
bit.
Hmm.
Um and I remember seeing it with my dad, and he's clued in on the sort of campiness of it, but he's also like, it was way more crazy like the old serials were than Raiders was. And so for I sort of look at especially those two on very equal footing now,
Mm.
and realize that Raiders is always going to be the first and always going to be the best, basically. But my personal favorite has
Mm.
been Temple for a long, long, long time, just because it hit at the right time for me, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And it wasn't just because Harrison Ford is shirtless for half of that. Obviously,
Not a
that
bad.
didn't not a bad thing. Didn't hurt.
Yeah.
But I just loved the kind of grossness of it.
Mm. Hmm.
I did watch it again recently, and yeah, it's the racist elements of it are kind of shine pretty brightly.
Which is maybe the most honored tradition of the genre, sadly. Like
Yeah,
it
right,
hits that fairly well, sadly.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, I don't hate it. It's low on my list, but it's mostly because I love Short Round. I love, 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 love.
Amazing,
We'll talk about
amazing.
Teddy later, but like, I'm sorry, Teddy, you are not Short Round, and there's nothing
I,
you can do about it.
I wanted to be Short Round's best friend so bad,
Oh
like,
yeah, Kiwi Kwan just
was
kills
so
it.
great. And then Goonies, of course, and I
Hmm.
wanted to be part of the Goonies. So
Yeah, yeah.
um,
But he
but yeah, he's
holds his
amazing.
own with Harrison Ford. Like holds his own. Every scene.
Crazy. Yeah.
My favorite scene, of course, is when he accuses Indy of cheating, and they're just kind of yelling at each
Yeah.
other, and they start yelling in. I'm not sure which language he's
I
from. I
think
don't
it's
know.
Mandarin. I
Is it
think it's
Mandarin?
Mandarin. Yeah.
And it's just really funny to me because
Yeah.
Indy does not treat him like a kid really in that scene. He's just very indignant, and
No.
it's great. It's
I also
so good.
I also love when they jump out of the plane on the raft, and he's like, "Hang on, lady, we're going for a ride."
Yeah, he not nuts. He crazy. Yeah, amazing. I don't want to hit on Willie Scott too hard. She's a terrible character in the sense that she doesn't bring anything to anything. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there is no point to Willie Scott.
Right. And
Which
I
is a
don't
shame.
and I don't blame Kate Capshaw
No,
one
she
iota.
she does the job. She does exactly what was asked of her.
He shows up and does exactly what was asked of her. And the idea that you introduce the female character in the very first scene, and she's sort of reluctantly along for the ride, is this trope of serials. I mean, that's definitely a trope of
100%.
serials.
Yeah.
It's just it's written so one note. To your
Mhm.
point, like, if they had gotten to the banquet scene and it wasn't that she was grossed out, but like she was the one who was like helping things along, even though Indy
Yeah.
was grossed out, like there needed to be something where she was an unexpected foil to him in
Mhm.
terms of all the weirdness they encounter, rather than just screaming,
Right. If she could have been the one with, I think of because they're trying to do these sort of, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. It's supposed to be a screwball relationship from
Right,
Screwball
right.
Comedy. It's supposed to be Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. It's supposed to be something like that.
My Man
Except
Friday kind of stuff,
right, which doesn't work because
No.
Marion's so damn good at it, and
Right.
and Willie Scott does not get to. She does not have like, okay, you can punch people, but I can talk my way out of situations where you can't. Like, there's none of that, and she
Right.
needs that thread to really
Right.
work.
Yeah.
But it's hard to beat things like like when I think of the cart chase and the physical nature of the creation of that, like it's insanity, and it's
Yeah.
so good.
The other reason that movie hit me square between the eyes is because around that time, around 82, 83, actually, is when I started to realize it wasn't just into movies, I was into special effects. And so
Yeah.
I subscribed to Starlog, and I subscribed to Cinefex. If people have never heard of Cinefex, look it up. It was this awesome little digest size magazine that was meant for industry professionals. So at 14, I'm reading all about how they strapped single edge reflex cameras onto little train cars and
Yeah.
did those stop motion scenes one frame at a time. And it's like it's mind blowing. I mean,
Yeah.
kids today with the CG with their CGIs, you just don't understand how complicated that crap was.
No.
And so part of it was the technicality of that movie and how it goes back and forth between miniatures and real life 8 or 10 times, sometimes in the same shot.
Mhm.
That as a formative preteen teenager was like, oh, I want to do that for a living. That is magic right
Yeah.
there.
I think for me, Temple of Doom is summed up by something Spielberg said. I think it's on the special. There was a special bonus disc with the DVD set that came out years and years and years ago when they had the three movies. It was like kind of leather bound. It looked leather bound. And he said, "Oh well, Temple of Doom. I was going through a divorce." And you're like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like there's a messiness and a darkness. And he goes, but I got to meet. He
Yeah.
goes, I don't really think the movie works necessarily, but I got to meet Kate, and so I guess that it works for that. And I'm like, okay, if this is just like your messy divorce movie,
Right.
at least it's entertaining. So there's that. Crusade,
It's his messy period.
yeah,
Crusade.
perfect.
Crusade is another, yeah,
Yeah.
script wise and story. It's like the
Yeah.
first one is that it's kind of airtight.
It's very airtight. Yeah.
I'm not as crazy about the what's her name, the Nazi.
Ilsa.
Ilsa's okay. And it's she's kind of a halfway point between Willie and Marion for me.
Right.
Because she does bring something to the table for sure.
Yeah.
And you just, I mean, she's going to be a turncoat eventually, right? That's just
She's too Aryan not to be.
right. Exactly. That was the weird thing to me. It was like, it was so telegraphed.
Yeah.
But I think the reason,
which is why I never consider her an indie girl. Like I don't even, she's a bad guy. Like,
Yeah,
and
right.
for me, the movie, if anything, lacks good bad guys. So she gets to fill in quite a bit of that role. But I totally understand from an indie girl perspective, she doesn't really act.
No.
But she's game, which is not something you got from Marion or from Willie. Like she knows what she's talking about in many ways. It is indie's equal when it comes
very
to
much so.
archaeology, at least.
I think my favorite thing about that one is it's kind of because of Connery, and especially because of emotionally how the finale resolves. It is the most insight we get to Henry Jr.'s life and personality. It's an insanely personal story. It's rooted in comedy at first, with the fireplace gag, and we named the dog Indiana and all that stuff. But then at the end, when he's literally like, let it go. Which they also echo in the new movie in a really way.
Crusade, and there's some real interesting ties between Crusade and Dial of Destiny for sure.
For sure. I love it. I think it's a little more grown up in terms of like the set pieces. It's so trying not to be as childish as Temple of Doom was, right? That it's a little more clean cut.
Harrison also for me looks like a different Harrison. He looks like a different decade Harrison. And you can kind of feel that in the performance a little bit. It's a little more grounded, which I imagine having Sean Connery on set would make you feel a little more grounded or want to be.
Right.
But like people consider this one kind of goofy. I don't disagree. It is in many ways, but not in a bad way. I think all the jokes land pretty well. And the thing about it is when people are like, well, it's a pretty goofy movie, I'm like, well, yeah, but his dad gets shot. Like there's a lot of gravitas in the third act, which sort of
they balance it. Yeah.
For me, people always complain about Marcus Brody making a shift from the first to the Last Crusade and being less serious. Just in the sense that he needed to be the mentor figure, and then Henry ends up being the mentor figure, and so what does Marcus do? And Marcus ends up kind of silly. The funny thing about that though is like upon rewatch, I recognized he is exactly like he is in Raiders in the first scene in Last Crusade. It's not until he gets out of the museum and gets out of the college and out of his element that he's completely befuddled what to do. So for me, it works. I don't think, I think it's people sort of saying like, well, he should be more serious. And it's like, I don't know. Like I don't know.
I mean,
He does. A Nazi does point a gun at him, and Dahome Elliott crosses his eyes, which I think is very silly. Like a carry on moment, but
right,
whatever.
right. Sure.
Yeah, good. Crystal Skull. It's not a good movie. It's not a good movie. It works better in Technicolor. When you really can live, and I just went for it. I said, this is a giant ants laser gun 50s movie. Like, this is what this is.
Here is here is the hill I will die on. For
Okay.
this movie. I agree with you.
Mhm.
It is not good.
Yeah.
I will say the first act is flawless. And
I don't disagree. I actually, upon rewatch, I think that there's, especially when you watch, we should talk about, let's talk about Chronicles in a minute.
Okay.
When you watch all the Chronicles and then you watch the movies, Indy getting out of a nuclear explosion in a fridge, it's not really that, it's really pretty on point. It's not that crazy or absurd.
No, and everybody gave it shit. And so, first of all, it is plausible, right? So ridiculous, but plausible. But more importantly, functionally, in terms of mythos and theme, Indy is quite literally blown out of the 1940s into the space age and into B movies. He's quite literally, his entire world blows up and he finds himself landing in this new reality of the 1950s, which wasn't what he grew up in, and wasn't the heyday of adventure in the 1930s and 40s. So I think functionally it was necessary, and I think Dial of Destiny does a very interesting same move to get him into the late 60s, early 70s, into the space race.
Totally. Kate Blanchett's pretty good. She's fun.
She's fun.
The thing is she's playing a version of a character that she does better in Thor, basically. It's this sort of swarmy intellectual goddess. And the 3D doesn't look good. The thing about old graphics and old stuff is, like, even if it looks a little chintzy, like, we love it because it feels of a time, it feels of a genre. The 3D animation effects, when it really doesn't work, takes away from that, I think, in a lot of ways. The Jeep chase is terrible.
The Jeep chase is terrible. The monkey swinging through the trees is terrible.
And
then that played for laughs pullback where you see that there are 5 more waterfalls for them to go over is dreadful. It's such a terrible shot, and it's not funny, and it's just
Marion.
Everything.
Marion's neutered completely. It's rough. It's rough. And actually the titular Crystal Skull, like, you can tell that it's hollow, and it's like crinkled up, translucent, that hollow wrap crinkled up inside of it. You can tell, especially on today's 4K TVs, like, how did this pass muster? It looks awful. It looks like such a cheap prop that you bought at, like, Spencer's. Much like Temple of Doom, there was a moment in a behind the scenes that explained this one to me. And it was Frank Marshall who said, here's pictures of all our kids, because we filmed all of this in America. It was the only one we filmed all in America. And so all our kids got to join us. And you're like, oh yeah, you didn't go anywhere. You didn't do anything. Like, it feels like it. You all got comfortable. And you're like, well, we can, modern age, we can do what we need with green screen.
And probably, right. And probably a lot, on the budget sheet, they were like, well, we can't spend that kind of money, and we don't know if this property is going to last, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So anyway, this takes us to Dial of Destiny. What are your initial thoughts on? Oh no, we should talk about Chronicles real quick. Let's talk about Chronicles very quickly. For those who don't know, this is the Young Indiana Jones movies. The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles was the TV version of that, and they edited 2 episodes into movies. And you can watch all these 2-episode movies on Disney Plus. There are huge swings, and the ones that work are great, and the ones that are bad are very, very bad.
The pilot is super clunky. I remember seeing it when it first aired and being like, I don't know, and then keeping up with the show and sort of finding things to enjoy about it. So if people haven't watched it, give it like 2 or 3 episodes because the pilot's kind of not great.
Well, I
Um,
would say you need to give it. I would say skip all of Corey Carrier as
oh,
child
okay,
indie because now it's in
sure,
chronological order,
yeah,
and that stuff is not good.
it's painful. It's
I
painful. Yeah.
actually ranked on Letterbox all of the films uh, in Young Indiana Jones. Ranked and did them all. Oh, and someone finally redid the graphics. Good, because they looked terrible before. Um, there are a couple when he's a child that are pretty good. I really love the Teddy Roosevelt Safari episode.
Yeah, yeah,
That one I grew up with. I think that might be his best as a young indie. But Phantom Train of Doom, which has Indy teaming up with a bunch of old army guys. Basically, it's like during the war, the First World War, but these guys don't have a country to go to. The countries don't want them because they're too old. So they're sort
right,
of the A team, basically, is the way to
right.
think about it. And they're run by none other than what's his Belloc himself. Paul Freeman is
Oh
playing
yeah,
one
right.
of them with makeup and stuff. So, and it's great. It feels like the most indie because it's a
I think
big train chase.
I think one of the things that, like, if people don't know the show, that one of the most interesting things about it that's very unlike the movies is there's always a character in it that is based on someone in history. Like the
Yeah.
whole reason for the show was to be somewhat educational, right? They
Mhm.
wanted to be an edutainment show in a
Yeah.
way, like um, Lawrence of Arabia shows up, the actual Lawrence
Yeah.
shows
Yeah.
up, you know.
He's best. Basically, he meets him when he's really young, and then is friends with Lawrence of Arabia through the entire series. Like they
Yeah,
just kind of meet back
yeah.
and forth at different times, which is sort of interesting.
And so they balance the fantasy element
Hmm.
that you really see the movies for with this kind of like no so a lot of this is based around actual historical places and people and times. And so I remember seeing it in my when it come out in my early 20s. I remember really enjoying it for that aspect alone, but
Yeah.
I have not revisited them recently as you have, so I will go by your letterbox ranking to
You
watch them.
should, because it was a lot of work and a lot of pain.
Yeah, yeah,
But like my favorite Indiana Jones girl is now Elizabeth Hurley in
mm,
Love Sweet Song, which is like, man, Marion's great. I love Marion. But that episode, you're just like, oh man, I wish they had gotten together. Like, she's so good. Organa, the bringer of the giver and taker of life, which is him meeting Albert Schweitzer of Schweitzer Falls fame. Um, Great. His best ones are all about him in World War One. Like if you can deal with the World War One aspect, it's great. And then if you only are going to watch one, I would recommend The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones: Mystery of the Blues because that has still the book.
that yep,
The
yep.
old ones they used to put at the beginning of the end, they'd bookend it with an old indie talking about the story. Here they got rid of all of that except for Mystery of the Blues because Harrison Ford actually came back with full fugitive beard as Indy in the snow. So you get Indiana Jones in the snow, which now we've never going to get any more of that except for Temple of Doom, a little tiny teeny bit at the tip of the mountain. And yeah, Jeffrey Wright is Sidney Bechet, and he's really good because he's Jeffrey Wright. So it's a great cast, and it's fairly fun. That episode also has Keith David's in it, and
Oh right,
uh,
right. Oh my God.
Jane Krakowski, which everyone knows from 30 Rock. She's in it.
Right.
Like a lot of people just show up, and you're like, that person.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of fun, and you get Harrison Ford, so no complaints there. So
So
anyway,
I will also add I find at least one of the video games to be very
yes, let's
much
talk video
canon.
games. Mm-hmm.
Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, which was a LucasArts point and click adventure game that had some action puzzle solving elements. It's hard to find. I don't know what it's on now to play.
You can buy it on Steam.
Oh, you can. Great.
You don't even have to buy it. It's basically abandonware at this point.
Yeah.
It's available any DOS emulator. There's a version of that game. Because I just played it before the movie too. That was one of the things that I did.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And I had the CD talkie version that had the voice
Yep.
cast.
Yep.
And if you don't want to play it, there's actually a couple of videos on YouTube of full playthroughs of the original one, which is like 3 or 4 hours, but there's one that's like an hour and a half that's the like highlights of the talkie version that gives you the breadth of the story, and it really feels like Indiana Jones story. It's great. And then the other game that came out later on in the console years was Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine,
Yep.
which was I had on Xbox, but it came out on a lot of different platforms, and the various platforms are varying quality. The best one being the PC one on Xbox,
Yeah.
but the story's pretty great, it's up there, say, with Temple of Doom for me in terms of like ranking with indie stories.
Interesting. Yeah, that was like early Spyro era 3D, and you can feel it. Like you're rotating yourself to make turns. Like, if you can get over that hump, you do fairly well. Fate was fun. I ended up watching the end of Fate. I got into the whole like labyrinth scenario, and I realized I had to go like 5 things back because I forgot a stick. And I was like, you know what? I don't have another 4.5 hours to do this. I'm just gonna watch the end of this. It is something that will. It is a very point and click classic in the sense that it will frustrate the hell out of you if you allow it. I think you're muted, Dave.
Sorry, there are a bunch of other games. Like I forgot, but there was another console game called Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, which I
Yes.
believe was 360.
Emperor's Tomb, you can play on um Xbox still. Had Xbox Gold. It's
Oh, it's still
compatible.
there. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that one was pretty fun. And
It's
again,
fun.
it was a little more modern 3D. And then of course there's the Indiana Jones Lego games, which are, fun and silly
Yeah.
and Lego.
Well, and then
Um,
the Wii version had the Wii had Staff of Kings, which is the Indiana
oh,
Jones
right, I
Staff of Kings.
forgot about that one.
Yeah, and I
Oh,
replayed it because I have a Wii emulator, and it's fun. It's fun. It's not the best in the world, but it does a pretty good job. It's still fun. It's a quick one. It's a pretty short game,
right.
but you know what? I'm always for an indie game. Bethesda apparently is working on one now. Um, they keep talking about it. They've said it's an Xbox exclusive, which is great for me. So yeah, we'll talk maybe more about that game when we talk
Yeah.
kind of future of indie.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and go to Dial of Destiny though. What's your initial thoughts?
I really, really enjoyed it. I remember I saw the trailer a couple months back, and it actually made me kind of like teary-eyed.
Hmm.
It hit as soon as the music sort of slowly kicks in the trailer and the way they use it, and Solace and give him hell, Indiana Jones, like so much of it was felt like Dave Bate,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where going into the movie, I'm like, all right, keep your expectations middling.
Yeah.
This may not be the movie you want it to be, but it ended up being the movie I wanted to be, and more than that, in ways that I didn't know I wanted. I really enjoyed it. I thought it's very solid. If I have one minor complaint, we'll get into the story and stuff, but I had one minor quibble in that I found the color grading to be
Mm.
annoying, because
Mm.
it's this very sort of dulled out palette,
Yeah.
a little too sunwashed, and it was, and I get it, they're going for late 60s, I get it, but at no time did I have a big sweeping epic vista where I went, ooh, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
all the indoor stuff's fine, but the outdoor stuff, the color grading felt a little icky to me, but that's again super minor,
Mm-hmm.
and super more tech head than anything. But I really liked it. I really enjoyed, first of all, Phoebe Waller-Bridge is fantastic
Mm-hmm.
in that role, and she plays such a great sort of foil slash sidekick in a way that we haven't really seen before. Like she's an amalgam of like Marion and Short Round in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, I've seen it twice, and I enjoyed it great the first time, and even more the second time, because I just picked up more details.
Mm.
How about you?
I would say my rating kind of went down a hair. I've seen it twice as well. The second time I started to see some seams. I think it's, God bless Crystal Skull for being there, I think, because my barometer's so off on indie quality now that like
Right.
it's nice to breathe and go, okay, I could even say like, this is a 3 out of 5. It's good.
Yeah.
It's understandable. The characters are pretty accessible. It's a nice way to go out. and it's better than Crystal Skull. You know,
Right.
so
Right.
in that sense, like it does what it's servicing, for
Right.
sure.
Right.
And I don't feel like it doesn't feel like a lesser than at 80. I feel like Harrison's more invested in this one than he was in Crystal Skull. Uh, he gets better jokes. There's just better stuff going on for him.
Right.
There's some plot stuff we can talk about, and of course, everybody, spoilers ahead. For me, it comes down to timing, I think. On rewatch, there's a whole both Indy and Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character's name. I'm forgetting all of a sudden.
Helena.
Helena. They both basically have a flashback at the same time while they're on their airplane about a time when Indy went and saw her and her father.
Right.
It has no relevance to anything plot wise. We know all the information that's already there. We know that Indy took it. We know that her father was going crazy because of it. We know that they met. We know because he calls her Wombat. So it ends up being kind of like a 5-minute segment that doesn't really add anything to the plot, unless you're wanting like a little extra emotional push for Helena. And I don't disagree if they then delivered that emotional push for Helena. And I don't think that they end up really hitting that in the third act very well.
My interpretation is a little bit different, only in Toby Jones's reaction.
Sure.
When he very much is very taken aback by his very good friend calling him crazy.
Yeah.
At that moment.
Yeah.
And begs him to destroy it. And so to me, it suffers from it, doesn't have a fine enough point on it, but it basically is showing that Indy's guilt about all this is he didn't do what his friend asked him to do.
Yeah. And again, I think there can be, I think it's like, it's not unserviceable. It's not pointless. Right. But the movie's long. I mean, the movie's pretty long. This is coming from some guy that I just saw Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning last night.
Oh, okay.
In 3 hours, and I'm like, no, that movie could be another 20 minutes. I'd be just fine. Like, you feel the link, I think, a little more in Dial of Destiny.
Right.
The other thing for me when it comes to timing, and we'll talk about characters in a second too, but timing wise, there's a whole segment where they get away on a boat, and then Teddy goes to get ice cream and gets captured again. And I'm like, okay, we could have just could we have just had Teddy stay on the boat? like if you 2 reshoots and I could save you 10 minutes. Like, there's just little things like that where you're not sure why things are formatted. And again, we can sit here and we can armchair it all day long, and but you're sort of just looking for the pacing issues. And I felt like this movie does have some pacing issues, especially, and we know that they went back because John Williams said that he had to go rescore the new ending. So we know they did a lot of changes in I think the last half more than the first. And I think you can kind of feel it. I think you can the mechanisms seem a little stiffer overall.
I think that the interesting thing about that, though, with Teddy, my counterpoint would be that we do finally get to see him as the street urchin and the pickpocket. It's insinuated a couple of times. And more importantly, once he gets captured, the way he gets away from the guy when he can't swim, we already know, is like, that's actually a really great sort of character building moment. And I wish they had given Teddy a moment where he realized that he's awesome. You know what I mean? They gave him that little joke as he did the paddling words were to swim. That was a lovely, funny little cherry at the end of that scene, but it should have been like, holy crap, I just took down a Nazi. You know what I mean? Like
the biggest one. Yeah.
The biggest one, right. There should have been a moment where Teddy was sort of congratulated for that, I think.
Yeah, I do feel like he doesn't get to, he's not Indy's sidekick. We'll talk about this. This movie, especially, I think this is John Williams' weakest score of all 4 Indiana Jones movies. It is a pastiche of a lot of other stuff. Not only from Indiana Jones movies, but from all of John Williams' scores. You're like, I hear a little bit of that. That's a little minority report in that. And look, he's 91. I'm not, you can only do so well.
Is it me, or like I will never tire of hearing the Indian theme or the Indian marrying
Mhm.
theme, right? Like those are
Perfect.
musically, they're
Yeah.
perfect. When it popped up the first couple of times in this movie, it felt like a copy. I don't know how to explain
Sure.
it other than that.
Well,
It
he wrote that Helena theme. And what's weird about the movie is once you know the Helena theme almost gets more screen time than the indie theme. Like
right,
it's sort of the underlining theme, kind of like how Henry's theme is in Last Crusade a little bit.
right,
But it doesn't
right,
represent
right,
anything.
right.
It's just like people are on motorcycles. Now here's the Helena theme, and you're like, you're not sure. Like that for me was the issue. Is like Indy has a sidekick in Helena, and then Helena has a sidekick in Teddy, and it just kind of feels like it's not that they're trying. It doesn't have that sort of like, okay, the sequel is going to be about her. Like it doesn't feel that way at all, which I think is very good. It
Right.
doesn't feel like a movie wasted just to set something else up. But at the same time, the dynamics are weird because of that. It's a strange
Sure.
mix of this is Indy's story,
Yeah.
but it's also kind of Helena heavy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my issue with it is it doesn't know. I don't sure it. Indy doesn't play back seat as much as he does in Crystal Skull at all until the third act. In the third act, he really does not. He doesn't get to make choices.
Yeah.
They get to be made for him. And if I thought that Helena's overall arc made a full kind of conclusion in the third act, I would be happier. Or if Indy got to make his own choices, I'd be happier. And I just sort of feel like everything gets kind of and like punch and now we're done.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but and again, I'm being harsh because I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a lot of fun, but yeah.
I think that to their credit, they also didn't put him in any physical situations that I can't imagine an 80-year-old being in, right?
Yeah.
Like the stunt
100%.
stuff, he's on a horse or he's on a motorcycle or he struggles to get away and he doesn't because
Yeah.
he can't. The moment with the whip, stand back, and everybody pointing guns is played for laughs for the right reason. So in that sense, his back seating sometimes felt like a necessity of Ford and by extent necessity of the story because he really is supposed to be that age. And that's why like the backseat he takes in the third act, I agree with you, but I also really love that it's the culmination of Indy's career in a way that he didn't know he needed or was ever going to get, which
No,
is that
totally.
he's imagined all of this. It's real, and that solace slash period at the end of his career after everything he's gone through back and being accused of murder and all that stuff, he's like, no, I can stop here.
Yeah.
And she was the one who said, no, you need to come back. I think they could have put a even finer point on that, and they do with the tableau of everybody at the end. But earlier on, which is you never were much for family, like that's the message of the ending is, there's always something to live for and pass on, I guess.
Yeah.
So in that sense, him going back and meeting being there during the one of the Roman sieges was like exactly what he has wanted his whole life, and it's handed to him. But it's also kind of toxic because he as an intellectual and a professor, he should know better. Like she
it's a monkey paw situation.
You're gonna muck it all up. Yeah, right.
You get to be there, but you're gonna screw it up, and then you're gonna die because you're injured. So it's not even like you're gonna live that long.
Right.
For me, it's interesting because I feel like that last scene it's very clear. Like you literally can say verbally in the script, like you can't live in the past, and like they never really go for it. They never like make it that clear of like, Indy, you can't. You got to move on. You got to move forward. You got to give it past your own grief of losing your son, and you have to be there for other people. And I just need Indy to. I needed her to go. You can't stay, and him be like, I'm going to stay, and Archimedes to be like, you can stay, and for him to take a step forward and then go, no, I can't. Like I just needed that little bit of, I recognize where I need to be and why, and I don't need to be told that.
Yeah,
I can't live here. Like we've landed on the moon. I can't live in the past. Things are moving on. It's okay. And some of that is there, but it does feel a little murky.
it's murky, and it feels like they wanted to show not tell so bad,
Mhm.
which is a very also more modern convention than the old films, I think.
I mean, Sean Connery says, "Let it go." Like,
Right. We
it's the
I
genre for saying it out loud. That's the whole.
exactly, and that's where I agree with you that
Yeah.
I think the emotional punch of the ending could have been more poetically spoken as well as shown.
Yeah.
It's shown, you know, you
Mhm.
understand what's going on in his head, that he's literally speaking Latin to,
Yeah.
but at the same token, I think she could have been the agent of more than just that punch,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
Um,
and again, in that no show not tell, she never says explicitly like, "I need you." Like, look, I don't have anybody.
yeah,
I need
right,
somebody. You know,
right.
and she kind of does in her actions,
Yes.
but it's not as comforting as Punch. Okay, you're back. Like, do you need tea? Like, what do you need? Like, it's just. But I will say, you know, I don't love that part, but the Marion stuff, I was almost in tears. It was perfect. I had no issue with it at all.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
and like right, and that's where I didn't need anything said.
Yeah.
Right, you they could have easily overplayed that dialogue, and I was kind of cringing, hoping they wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't. And it's about two actors at of a certain age,
Yeah.
acknowledge, because there's it's such meta emotion going on there, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's not just those characters; it's those two performers, and you know, summing it up by "It hurts everywhere" is a punchline and a clue into Indy's grief.
Yeah.
Right. It's so beautifully done, and where doesn't it hurt here, and then lead up to her face. Like that's cinema right
Mm-hmm.
there. What
Mm-hmm.
was missing from it was the moment when she's on the couch and looking at him, and people start coming in the door. She should have said something. She should have
Mm-hmm.
said something before, you should have left me there. Because what does he say? He says, you should have left me there.
Yeah.
She should have said something. Helena should have had a little poetic moment of saying something quippy and
Mm-hmm.
meaningful, that was meaningful to her. Because him saying you should have left me there is kind of, she should be hurt by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. A little bit.
Like, yes, I saved your ass, but you unwittingly saved mine, and we need each other. You know what I mean? That's what I needed said more from her character. The only knock against the script for her character that I have, because every other scene she steals, every scene she's in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a way that doesn't feel girl bossy or
No
at all. It feels like
yeah
it's I mean, she's Belloc. I mean, she really is Belloc without being murdery.
Right,
Like at the
right.
start, like she's selling stuff. Like
Yeah,
she is the other side of that coin in many ways, while still having enough morality to keep Teddy around, enough morality to care about what her father cared about. Like, it's interesting to see that transformation, and it's fun. Sala, perfect, no qualms. Some people were
Right.
upset that he was a cab driver, and I was like, I mean, as if you've never heard of an immigrant story where you're like in charge of a bunch of diggers in Egypt, and then you immigrate and you get the job that you get. like it's
right.
it's 100%.
It
Yeah.
didn't bother me,
No.
especially that Sala introduces his kids as, this is the man who brought my family over during the war, because that's
Yeah.
what would have happened, right?
100%.
Um,
Yeah.
And his whole speech at the door of the airport about, I miss waking up in the morning.
Yeah, I
and
miss the
smelling
sea.
I miss the
Yeah.
sea. Like, I got choked up. It was
Yeah.
so beautiful. And then that they pay it off with the laugh of him almost getting hit by a car
Yeah.
that's just perfect. That's Spielberg right there.
Yeah.
That's kudos to Mangold for sort of staying in a particular kind of lane, but
Mhm.
also giving it some of the stuff that you've seen in his other movies in terms of being a little more contemporary.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love the give them hell Indiana Jones line. I don't love the car almost hitting him. And
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is really interesting. And I think it's because I just want it to be I don't
You
need,
wanted it to be honest, yeah.
I don't need Indy to care, right? Indy's always going to be like, okay, whatever. But Sala really believes it and really says it, and we really believe it, and like, you want that moment to sort of lead into the map, like give him hell Indiana Jones, and then there's the map with the red line and the dot. Like that's what you want, and instead you have to like see him look at pictures. They don't even do the red dot until like later on in the movie, and you're like,
Right,
man,
right.
like it's just little bits. It's not a pro. That's one of those things that's like I think James Mangold's really good at what he does. I think the movie makes good use of his abilities. I think he was the right guy to choose if you're not going to have Spielberg. I'm curious of the machinations of the Lucasfilm people. I don't know, you know, what sort of like, okay, this thing has to happen or this can't, or China won't let us show it if you do that. Like, I don't know the business side of what made story changes maybe. But overall it's a lot of fun. Before we talk about Disney going and creating more stuff with indie or what that might perchance, what's your ranking? How do you rank this with the rest of them?
Oh, that's a hard one. I've had a number of people ask me that, and I hesitate to definitively put it anywhere. But I would say, I mean, let's just say this: it is really difficult for me to put my actual favorite, which is Temple of Doom, first, just because of the legacy of. I'm not going to take that ire. I'm gonna pick my battles wisely. Fine, Raiders is the best, is number one. Fine, okay. I still put Temple of Doom second. My hot take is I actually put this third.
Interesting.
I put Dial of Destiny third, and I put Last Crusade right behind it, like a hair's breadth behind it,
and then a big old gap,
and then slightly not behind for the first act of Crystal Skull, and then the rest of the movie can go to hell.
Yeah. It's for me, it's Raiders, Last Crusade, and then Dial. Again, okay. I really think that you have to have grown up on Temple of Doom or something to really get Temple of Doom, because it doesn't it's kind of one set. They don't go anywhere. No, it's kind of it's all in wackier. Itself. It's wackier. Yeah. And when I think about what do I want to sit down and watch, I'm not sure I'm gonna like sit down and watch Dial of Destiny a lot. But I don't know if I would sit down and watch Temple a lot. So for me, Dial does a fairly good job of being, I think of it's like it's the second runner up for we learn lessons Indiana Jones movies, right? Because Crystal Skull has no lesson to be learned. It just says a bunch of stuff and then it ends. Right. Even though it tries to like do something, I don't know what it's trying to do. So in that sense, like for my love of the character, I think it has to go Raiders Last Crusade, a Dial, because he gets to deal with that. And then we'll go Temple and then huge gap. Temple and then huge crap and Crystal Skull. Before we finish off talking about the movie, though, it's shocking we've not talked about the introduction, the opening scene, the 20 minutes of de-aged Indy.
De-aged Indy.
I was happy the first time watching it, and the second time watching it, I was like, this doesn't work for me at all. Really? I like the gags. I think the set piece works. I don't have any issues plot wise with it. I think it's fine. The de-aging, the moment he opens his mouth and it's like, because he looks great. You take off the thing and you see his face and you're like, oh, this is whoa. And then he's like, but I still have Harrison Ford's 80-year-old voice.
But they didn't do any AI to his voice to get it younger.
I don't know. They would have. They might have, but he's so gravelly, I can't tell the difference anymore. Here's my take. You can tell where they started the budget for the de-aging and where the budget ended, because like the very last shot of that scene when he's walking away, like in that wide shot, that is some Xbox One graphics if I've ever seen. It's rough as hell. You really pay attention to the last bit there. It's right. Pretty bad. Again, I enjoy the scene. I could just see it's like I'm watching a puppet show and I can see the hands at the top, like, or, the marionettes. Right. Like I just can see too much of the strings to fully fall into place. The second time, first time I was like gung ho. I was just thrilled.
I think the issue with that is we're never going to believe it, only because we know it's not true. We know for a fact it's not true. So I give it a huge pass in a lot of ways. Because of that, like, because I'm never going to get to an emotional space where I'm like, oh my God, I was completely fooled, because you're not, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I even go back to like Tron Legacy and the de-aging of Kevin Flynn. Like
Sure.
that was super rough for
Yeah.
sure. You look at it now and there are people who have done deep fakes of it that are better, right? And I'm sure they use some deep faking in this movie as well. But like I look at well, just to use Tron as an example, one of the reasons that movie gets a huge pass for me is because not only was it the first real like main character de-aged, it had to be done in stereo. It had to be
Yeah.
done in 3D
Mhm.
as well, and fit into a 3D world, and not look like Benjamin Button is one thing, but
Yeah.
that was an incredible leap. And
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't work well, especially when he's during the speech at the end in his mouth. Like when they're really emoting is when it falls apart. But what impressed me was this little subtle things of Indy reacting to things or just giving smart ass looks. It was like,
Yeah.
that's great. Like
Some
I'm
of it,
down.
it's weird. Anytime that I feel like, yeah, once he starts moving, that's when and they're still trying to put a face on him. That's when I feel it gets a little rougher.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's so. What's interesting for me though is like Mads Mikkelsen's villain is also de-aged in that scene. I couldn't have told you that he was. Like it's very clean.
right.
I think that deals a lot with, we know Harrison Ford's face forward and backward at that age.
Yeah,
And that helps a lot. But even when he's de-aged, but he's like 20 years older in the flashback, it's just not as
right.
bad. I just
No,
think that
it's not. It's not.
there's a limitation in the technology of how far you can go back and still feel, I don't know, fully present. And
Yep.
What's funny is, and we probably should have done this before I saw Mission Impossible, because that's a 5-star movie and it's absolutely incredible. And it's so physical in its action, and there's, but they have, and this is not really a spoiler for the movie, but there's a small flashback of Tom Cruise as pre the first movie Ethan Hunt.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but you never see his face.
Oh, okay.
It's just long Tom Cruise hair in a shadowy body, and you go,
Right.
oh, thank God. Like you're just like, oh, this is, yep. There's no, you don't need it. Now Indy is not necessarily the same way. It's a whole scene, it's a whole thing, there's dialogue. I'm not trying to compare them, but that those technological like leaps, when they do them when they don't need to, I'm always like against it, and I was racing, and then they didn't. I was like, oh, good. Like you don't have to do it. Do what's best for the
Right.
story.
And
So
I guess that's the thing, is this one required so much of his personality to be part of the story, because he's
yeah,
dealing with Toby Jones, and so like that's the other filter I put this kind of stuff through. Is it serving the story, or are they just showing off?
it's serving. It's serving for sure.
And it's serving the story. The thing the thing that impressed me the most was when he's in the noose and the bomb drops.
Oh, it's great.
That whole sequence was like, I can't believe that's not actually him. Like I didn't find any flaws there. It's when he's not moving very much and talking, you're like, oh, and that just, I chalk that up to, right, it's easier to wave your hands and make things blurry and action and get away with it than you can with a long studied dialogue shot. You know what I mean?
And I think that's the thing too, is like, for me, of all the action set pieces, I think it's a little too car chasey overall. I think there's
there's like three of them.
Yeah, and you feel it. Whereas the first bit when he's in the noose and then the things are crumbling and he's trying to get over the thing, but he can't.
Right.
He's the floor is now going, and you go, this is an Indiana Jones set piece. Like,
oh, absolutely.
You're on a noose, but you have no floor, and there's fire, and the only way you're getting out of here is if you bang around a lot. Like that's how it's gonna hurt, and it works really, really well. And the anti aircraft guns on the train misaligning and firing, so good.
Such an indie moment that the Nazis are hoisted on their own petard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
so good,
so perfect, perfect.
So there you go. That's some thoughts for sure. I think I'm glad we went out this way. Though I don't know. What do you think Disney's going to do next? What do you think is going to happen?
I think they can make video games to the end of time. Is a real easy one.
Yep. Comic books too, if they didn't do any tie-ins this time, which is very weird. They did a small run and an adaptation for the last movie, but they really have they haven't done comic books for indie since the Dark Horse era, which is very strange.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you see Sala and Helena and Teddy and the kids walk off at the end of the movie, and it's sort of like maybe they'll go on an adventure, and I'm open to that idea. It's just, what are you going to call it? Like, it's
Yeah.
not going to be like, does it turn into a Star Wars story? Does it turn into something, and then it's an Indiana Jones adventure? You know what I mean? Like,
boo.
yeah, but no, I don't want that. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't want anybody taking the mantle of Indy. That doesn't
No.
need to happen. We've already seen him young. You don't need to do prequels. Like, that has been mined
Yeah.
for all it can be mined for.
Yeah.
But I like Helena, and I liked Teddy. I don't know if you did, but I thought Teddy was great. I thought Teddy
He's
was
just
kind of underused.
Yeah. Let him cook. I don't
Yeah.
know anything about Teddy. So
Yeah, right.
that's kind of where I'm landing on that. Yeah,
But I'll watch something with Helena. I just don't know what it would be or what you would call it.
the worst case scenario, which is where I think they'll go, is Helena's going to get a Disney Plus show. Like, it has that vibe, and it's going to be canceled after one season. Like,
like National Treasure.
100%. And whereas what I really want is, if they really want to get smart about it, is you need to really just go outside of the realm a little bit. It's got to be short round. It's got to be Kiwi Kwong. It's got to be martial arts and adventuring in martial. It's a martial arts adventuring serial type kung fu 70s thing. Not do your own thing. That works. We love him already. He's very funny. Let him exude his strengths in that way.
Yeah, I think that's great. And to be honest, I could see them doing a movie rather than a series with him. You know what I mean? And then Helena can be in it and drop in and out, or be the instigator of the adventure at the beginning or something.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
I think Indy's legacy is an interesting thing to explore from a story perspective, but the problem is, Indy as a character, as an IP, is such a pastiche of so many other things.
Yeah.
That it's like, what are you bringing to the table if it's not Harrison Ford and it's not Indy as a character? And I just don't know if the IP is worth it after that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's run its course. You can't complain. It's had decades of success. And things can die. It's fine. like
right.
Make t-shirts and action figures and video games and just let it be. The problem with Lucasfilm in general is, everyone thought it was a great idea that Disney bought Lucasfilm, and it's like, they really only have two properties, and one of them is very much connected with one dude. And they were like, what about Willow? And everyone went, I don't know. So it's one of those things where I don't know what they'll do. They'll probably do it wrong. But
yes, very much so.
Give Timothy Zahn the license to do 3 Indy during World War II books. Like, I'd read those,
Yeah, publishing is an easy one. Publishing in video games and comic books.
Yeah,
that's an easy, and that I hope they do continue, because that is using the strength of the IP that does not need Harrison in it, and it hasn't in the past. They've already had games that,
My only other thought, which I think would work really, really well, is a Saturday morning adventure serial cartoon.
That's cool. I like that idea.
There's a gentleman, you can look it up online. You can look it up. You'll find it. It has a very Johnny Quest kind of feel. And it's Indy and short round and Indy kind of going around and doing stuff. And it's just sort of like an intro for a show that doesn't exist. It's a proof of concept. And I go, yeah, sure. I'll watch that. Like, every week Indy gets in a little adventure. Like, fine, great. I think it's more for me than kids, but why not? Who cares? So not a 3D version. I don't want a 3D Indiana Jones like Rebels. It's not the same thing. No. It's got to be 2D animated. I think that could be a lot of fun.
I think that would be great. A short round based animated series would be
really there you go. Yeah. Whatever puts money in Kiwi Kwan's pocket, I'm happy about.
Yes.
He's back. Let's keep him there. Well, thank you, Dave, for talking lots about Indy. I'm sure the girls are very happy that we didn't do this on main, as it were. So But
On this episode of Old White Guys Talk,
it's true. It's true. But talking about one of the most dad-like old, you know. But anyway, I still think it was a worthwhile conversation. And if you have thoughts about the conversation, let us know. You can get us at bit.ly/rat castle. And on there, you can send us an email from there. It'll take you right to our email, which is ratcastlepod@gmail.com. So let us know your thoughts. Of course, this is all produced by yours truly. Tell your friends. We'd love to have more people listen to what we're up to. And of course, there'll be a regular episode come Monday. But yeah, Dave, so good to always talk to you. Always fun to talk about indie.
absolutely.
And everybody go ahead and pick up your whips and your fedoras and your satchels and
Jump over that chasm. Jump over that wide chasm.
Yep, and then exit to the left.
Will you stop this foolishness?
What foolishness would you like to see?
Will you get out of here?